Hi, this is the fellow passenger. I have had the privilege to speak to someone who I think reinvented the purpose of the TB-303 as well as the 606, 202, 808, etc. He took those legendary instruments and just put them in a context I hadn't heard before. However, I discovered his music quite long before he went down that path. I listened to his releases in the early 2000s that came out on labels like Plateaux. I'm talking to Andreas Tilliander today, also known as Mokira, TM-404, and many other names that he's used for his releases. He's also from Sweden, like myself, and we have occasionally crossed paths before, but I've never ever had the opportunity to actually have a conversation with him, even though we have several friends in common. So I'm really looking forward to this chat and hear about some of the music that I was aspiring to make back in the day. So sit back and listen, and I hope you will enjoy this. Thank you, Andreas, for joining in this interview. And I think before we start, I'm just going to say, but both Andreas and I are Swedish. So I will try to remember that. So we will just try to stick to English. But it's really difficult to introduce you and really easy at the same time because you've been around for a long time. You've released loads of music under loads of different names. And I would argue that you also have been breathing new life into gear like the TB-303, like at the point when you thought like, okay, everything has been done using this box, but you just like put it in a new context. So it's such a privilege to speak to you. And even though I've known of you and I have sort of met you in passing before, I've never really had a chance to have a conversation with you.
No, just, we've been saying hello, but I guess that's about it, right? More or less.
That is about it.
Yeah.
I think the last time I met you was you were performing as Condense.
Okay. Where was that?
I'm just trying to remember. Was it at
Was it
Södra
in
Teatern,
Stockholm? Or?
maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I guess it was during the Art's birthday party.
I think, yeah, and I think Sleep Archive played.
Oh, yeah. It was Art's birthday.
Yes.
Yeah.
But just to create the complete picture, I would like to sort of move back in time a bit because I discovered you around 2000, 2001, but I'm sure your music background goes further back.
Yeah, it does. But I guess I started putting out I didn't put out any records in the 90s, but I put out a lot of music on compilations, CD compilations and stuff like that. But my first,
What was your like gateway into electronic music to start with? Like
um,
sort of older siblings or
yeah, the thing is, I'm so boring that I was not interested in any other music until I discovered electronic music. So I never had a period of listening to Madonna or Black Sabbath or Michael Jackson or whatever. I went straight into Kraftwerk and Depeche Mode and Pet Shop Boys, and I guess I was about, I don't know, 10 or something like that when I really got into electronic music.
but where did you hear it? Because like having grown up in Sweden as well, it was not as if, well, maybe like Depeche Mode and stuff, but Kraftwerk and things, it was not really something I would just hear on the radio. Like where did it?
No, the thing is, my older brother, he's 3 years older than me, and his friends were like 3 years older or even 6 years older than him. So when I was like, 8 or 10 years old, I would listen to the music that he brought home, and that was the same kind of music that the average 15-year-old were listening to at the time. And I guess you know Depeche Mode, they were huge. They were huge. So it was not a strange thing to listen to Depeche Mode in 1980, whatever, 1987, or when I started listening to them, because they were huge. And of course, in even bigger in Britain. But Sweden had a huge crowd for Depeche Mode as well. So, and Kraftwerk, I guess, yeah, they were a little bit stranger. And I was really early doing a lot of martial arts. And at one time, a friend of my brother came to our house, and he saw that I had his Bokken sword, like this wooden sword, and he really wanted to have it. So I asked him, like, okay, so what can you give me in return? And he gave me Duff, Für immer, and Yasu, the second album, you and me both. So I got introduced to Duff when I was about 12 or something like that, and I hated it. I thought it was like, no, this is so weird. This is so weird. And then, you know, as you did back then, you didn't have that many records, so you would just continue to listen, even though you didn't like it initially. So it took me about, I don't know, half a year or so, and then I was a huge Duff fan as well.
I know exactly what you mean. And it was sort of like when you bought a CD or you got it, you know, it's like, I have nothing. But then you would never, I never give music that much of a chance today.
No,
Because like I can just move on to something else, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
thing.
I mean, these days, I guess I get about 20 promos each day. So, I mean, you listen to a track for like 5 seconds, then you skip. Nah, I don't know. Was nothing for me. And the next track, you know, you're getting spoiled. It's so easy to be spoiled these days with, you know, digital culture.
But what about the transition then from, okay, so you've been introduced to this sort of synth-based music back then.
Yeah.
To actually like taking the step into making it. How did that happen?
I guess every kid in our block were we were doing the very same thing. Like all of us were into martial arts, all of us were into skateboarding, and all of us were into making music. So it was so natural for me. Like, you know, being a child, and you get to visit the older kids, and they had some samplers, and they showed me. I even remember they showed me, Whitney Houston. I want to dance with somebody. Somebody made the same beats on an 808, and they were like using her voice and playing with it on EMU Emax sampler. And I got so impressed by that. And that was the same people that also showed me how to do kick flips and stuff like that. So it was such an easy, like, you know, it was like a small working class area, but we all took care of each other in a really nice way. So, and I was always the youngest one, so I got introduced to the heavy stuff early.
But I mean, it's interesting because where I grew up, like it was really like punk rock was everywhere, but there was hardly anyone listening to electronic music. And I suppose it must have been amazing for someone just to give you an intro to how does this work, like someone who just helps you get started. So when did you
Yeah.
get your first piece of kit? Do you remember? Your first real synth or drum machine or sampler or whatever?
I'm not you can actually see it in the background, but it's blurred out because of the focus. But on the shelf above my vinyls, there's apart from a vocoder, there's also analog spring reverb and BBD echo, which I bought. I still have the receipt, actually. I bought it in 1992. So that's, 31 years ago. So I was 14. But before that, I also had, like, you know, keyboards, and I actually bought an Amiga 500 just to make music, not to play games, but to make music. But my first proper, you know, gear is that one, the spring reverb that I still use.
What is it? What brand is it? I can't see what it is.
It's called Aria. It's
Okay.
called Aria Loco Box. I even named one of my tracks Loco Box after it, like
I'm
20
sure
years
that
ago.
must be worth loads of money today.
No, it's not. Nobody knows about it. So it's, you probably get it for like 200 quid or something like that. So, but it's still usable. You know, if you want the harsh,
Yeah.
weirder stuff, it's good.
So how did you then move on from So you were into the sort of synth music, and you
Yeah,
started playing gear.
yeah.
And there was probably something happening in between that time and you releasing, the sort of clicks and cuts, minimalistic electronica on Plateaux, which is where sort of I started discovering you. Like, what happened in between that period musically for you?
I would say that I have to blame Aphex Twin for most of it because 30 years ago, 1993, he put out the On single, and also, of course, artificial intelligence compilations. The first compilation was out, yeah, it's also 30 years ago, right? And I was so much into, the electronic body music, like the Night Arab stuff and Front 242 stuff. Uh, and I would try to do the same thing. I would try to be, singing with a heavy voice, but it's sort of hard when you're 15, 16 or something like that. And then all of a sudden I heard Aphex Twin on MTV with a Jarvis Cocker video. And I discovered, oh, fuck, you don't actually have to sing in music. That's amazing. And that was really like a big turning point for me because I was a lousy singer. So I was so glad to be, oh, you can actually do this instead. And then, Aphex Twin had a lot of nice melodies, and I was trying to do the same thing. I have some early mini disc recordings from like 1995 or something like that. All my music is like, 106 and TR606, TR606. So it sounds like the first Autechre album or like some of the Aphex Twin stuff as well. And then after another couple of years, I heard the first Panasonic album, which blew my mind even further because it was like, okay, so you don't even have to have melodies. You can make electronic music with just, percussion. So yeah, I guess
Were there some of your friends like into this as well, or because it's getting quite sort of niche now, or were you quite alone in being curious about this sort of stuff?
I would say that I was probably the first one in Hässleholm to be into Panasonic, at least. But I had some older friends that were into Warp Records. I remember, and I see this post, like Facebook always reminds you what you did, yeah,
Yeah.
this day 20 years ago, or no.
Yeah.
And there's always a post from is it 1993 when I was going to see LFO playing in Lund, which is a town about 35 minutes from Hässleholm, where I grew up. So we were a lot of Hässleholm people going to Lund to see LFO, and this is 1993. So and I was 15. So I guess in many ways, like, the kind of music that I'm into these days it really started 30 years ago, in 1993. And as you know, Hannah, our mutual friend,
Yeah.
she's a big Depeche Mode fan, and so was I. And Depeche Mode played here in Sweden 2 days ago, I think. And I saw them in 1993. And I guess I made the transition from synth music because of Depeche Mode, and I was a bit disappointed on what they did in 1993. I'm not anymore though, because I think that the Songs of Faith and
When they've done
Devotion
sort of
album,
music for faith and devotion or
yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly.
When they sort
And
of got too much. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, but like, oh gosh, that's when they started going more sort of rock and rolly rather than
oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
It was blues music and it was
Yes.
gospel music and stuff like that. But these days, I consider it their best album. But back then, 1993, hearing Depeche Mode and also hearing artificial intelligence and Autechre and Aphex Twin, it was time to move on.
Mm-mm. So those mini discs that you had, or like you still have by the sound of it,
I do.
did you at that point, did you sort of send them to record labels, or were you just doing them for fun yourself, or what happened? Did you perform live and stuff?
I did perform live a few times, and I also did send a few demos. But this is when I did the more, as we call in Sweden, synth music. I know it's not I guess in Britain you don't use that word, but
Yes, I
stuff
think
like
people
Depeche
would you
Mode,
call
From
it
Two
like,
for
is it
Two.
sort of EBM type stuff?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did appear on a couple of compilations like 96, 97 with that kind of music.
But that wasn't
And
that wasn't the sort of warp type stuff. That was more
no,
than.
I did the warp type stuff at the same time, actually.
Okay. But you
But
didn't sort of
on
send
the
that. You didn't send that to any record labels or anything like that.
no, I didn't. No, didn't. Um, I guess the first demo I sent was in 1999 to a Malmö label called Komplott, and they signed me. And I also got signed to a Stockholm label called Recordings Under Construction. They had a few artists that I really liked, and I moved to Stockholm in 1999 at the same time, really.
So was that your first like releases rather
Yeah,
than just being part of a compilation as such?
yeah. I put out an LP as Comp, which is heavily influenced by Warp Records.
Oh gosh,
With a
I don't think I've heard that. Is it still
no.
available anywhere?
Uh, I'm sure it didn't sell too much, so I'm sure you can get it somewhere.
All right, cool. That's interesting. So you that's really, but then it's not that long, not much later until you got to release things on Mill Plateau.
No. The year after, like in 2000, I put out my first record on Raster Noton as Mokira,
Was that the
which
first
was
Mokira release?
yeah, it was.
So how did you get in touch with those Raster Norton and Mill Plateau labels? Like how you must have discovered them, and did you send them demos? Did you have contacts?
Yeah. When I was very new in Stockholm, I met this guy called Mikael Stavestrand, who
Oh yeah.
became a close friend of mine. And he was coming from industrial music and sound art music. And I was sort of into techno music at the time. And we sort of met in between somewhere. He was sending demos to Force Inc. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I should do that as well. And in autumn of 1999, we were both going to play in Helsinki. And if you live in Stockholm, you take a 12-hour ferry, which is super, super famous for people getting absolutely knackered. And
Yeah.
so just when the ferry was leaving Stockholm, and this is back when a mobile phone was, I didn't have one myself, but Mikael had one. So Achim Sepansky, the owner of Force Inc. and Mill Plateau, called Mikael just when the ferry were leaving Sweden. And he said, I want to sign you guys.
Both of
And
you.
we were like, whoa, shit, this is so cool. So we both got signed the same time.
And drunk after.
Sorry?
And then you had lots to drink.
Oh yeah. 12 hours of drinking until we came to this
So
sound
he
art
knew that you
festival.
were friends, obviously. Like, or
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Maybe Mikael said something like, "Oh, Andreas is here as well." So,
I think I got 2 albums on Forcing Mikael Stavestrand. I remember
yeah,
what it looks like. It's sort of quite grey with some zoomed in detail of something that looks like a power line or something. I don't know.
it's called Reduce.
Yes, yeah.
And
I got one.
I
I can't
think
remember what that looks like, but yeah.
that was probably my first mastering work, his Reduce album.
So how
on
did you
Forcing.
okay, now lots of questions about how you're making it. To start with, when I discovered Mill Plateau, I just like that sort of clicks and cutsy type stuff. I was just absolutely absorbed by it. But I had no idea. I was trying, but I had no idea how to get sounds like that. I was sort of trying, but I just couldn't get that vibe. How did you, well, using hardware and stuff, like how did you learn? Was it like trial and error, and also mastering, which is quite a sort of a black art? Like how did you learn how to make that stuff and to master?
On those albums, I would say, let's see, this one was my main weapon. The Nord modular, the Swedish, yeah. So I would sample super digital sounding noises coming from my Nord modular, and I would cut it up and make it, super short decay and, fast attack stuff. And let me see, my first like sort of clicks and cuts release where I did it in this freeware tracker, Finnish tracker called Jeskola Bus.
Oh, I used that as well, which sort of like you had these boxes and you connected them up. Like,
yeah. It was sort of modular, but still a tracker. So, and I came from.
Did you make that stuff in that? Wow.
Yeah. I guess my first couple of, maybe my first 5 albums or something like that. I mean, made in that software. I even remember I was having. I had a guy staying in my one-room Maria Toyota apartment, and he had a regular job, and he would be, he was super into the same kind of music that I was into. So I would be sitting on my floor, having my speakers as a stand for my screen, and I would be sitting, on the floor with him sitting in my sofa next to me, and he would be like, "Oh yeah, this sounds cool. Yeah, nice." So I'm not sure if I really knew how to, I guess I was super into sound, but maybe I didn't really knew what I was doing. So.
But did you incorporate, when you were working in Jeskola Bus, did you incorporate like hardware in that setup, or were you purely? Well, no, you must have used your Nord modular then.
Yeah. It was just a Nord modular. It was the only hardware, because this is when I just moved to Stockholm, and I still had a few synths back home. But since I moved by train, I couldn't bring that much. So I brought the Nord modular and a computer. I even remember I had a Juno synth, Juno 1, and when I got my first.
It's an Alpha Juno 1 up there, if that's what
yeah. Okay.
It's too dark. So
Nice. I don't have anyone anymore, but I remember I guess it was the end of the 90s as well, when I just moved to Stockholm and I got signed for the first time, and they needed, they needed music from me. And I was like, okay, but I only have a Juno 1. What should I do? So I traded it for an MC303, the groove box, because it had several parts. You can make drums and chords with it.
Yeah. How did that go? Did you actually release something using that? That would be super impressive.
I do have one track on Birth Records, which I made 10 years later, maybe. But there is one track where all of the ingredients is the MC303 and the Minimoog, which you can see here.
Gosh, I mean, that's like quite opposite sides of the quality spec. I mean, it would be I have to say, like, if you did another TM-404 record, if you know people who have the MC303, I want to see one of those videos where you have like 5 of them and just them like go all in.
I actually had my MC303 until 2 years ago when I gave it away. So, but I did keep it for 20 years or something.
So number one, like the question, like around music, do you live from your music and sound production, etc.?
I've never ever had any job outside of music, but it's some years my own music is my main income. Some other years, it's the radio show that I'm hosting with a friend, Mats Almegård. You know him as well.
Yeah. We have to say the name of the radio show so people can go and listen. I'll put a link in the description. I hope you can. Yes, you can listen to it from abroad. It's
you can. You
good.
can.
Good. Electronist. No, sorry.
Yeah.
Electronic.
In P2. Some years, that's my main income, and I'm also a touring member of Familjen, which is a Swedish electronic pop band, or I guess these days we're just the singer and songwriter and me on stage. So it really depends, but I've never done any work outside of music.
Gosh, I mean, amazing. All credit to you, because also like by the sound of it, you've never had to go entirely mainstream. You have been able to sort of keep it something that you can be proud of. That's the impression I get anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few remixes that I might regret these days, but in general, and I'm not super proud of all of my records, but in general, I guess, yeah, I've been doing all right.
But when did TM-404 come about? When was that born? I think I got the first album. Is it the one with the black and white photograph where you sort of, yeah.
That one was out 10 years ago, but I guess I started with the tracks 2 or 3 years prior. And I started by, I did have a few extra TB303s. And I
how did that happen to start with? Because
I've always, I mean, I've always been interested of the 303. Like it's been, the sound of it has always been, my number one sound, really. And when we were touring a lot with Familjen, I needed to have one backup 303. So I usually brought 2 303s on tour, and then I would like to have one in the studio, so I can, because back then we had all the touring equipment were always stored. So between weekends, I didn't touch the gear at all. We always had like the MPCs, the 303s, the mixing deck. Everything was always stored. So I needed to have one at home as well, and then I needed one in the studio, and things started to go downhill.
But did you know, because it feels like, I'm sure that everyone is listening now have probably come across TM-404, but if not, how would you describe it? It's like dub, but using the classic Roland, like 303, but also the 202 and 808, etc. Right?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I started it because I started getting a lot of questions from friends like, "Hey, Andreas, you don't need to have 5 303s. Could you just sell me one very cheap?" And I was like, maybe I don't know. Okay, I take it as a challenge. I'm actually gonna make music using just 303s. So I decided to only use 303s, and obviously the same period of Roland gear like the 606 and 808, and I guess there is a 909 somewhere as well, but mainly 606 and 808 and 202 and 303. And I did it just for fun. 100. I mean, of course, making music is always about having fun, but this project was really not about even releasing the music. Back then, we were touring so much with Familjen. I remember one year we made 100 gigs in a year,
Wow.
And I guess this is during the same time. So I knew that I would have money anyway. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to be, during weekdays, I'm going to be sitting in my studio and just noodling out with the 303s and my tape echoes. Not any plans whatsoever on releasing it. However, I did. This is back when YouTube just started, so I filmed some of the sessions with multiple cameras, and I uploaded it. And I didn't post about it. I just, let it be on YouTube. And then I guess it took about 1 year, and people started to writing me and being like, "Okay, do you want to release this on my label?" I had a lot of offers, and I went with Ulf Eriksson on Kontramusik because he's an old friend of mine, and I put out 1 or 2 records prior as well. So I went with Kontramusik, and then I did my very first TM-404 show at the CTM in Berlin at Berghain, which was super, super nice to be able to present a new project on Berghain. I was very, very nervous, but it became, it was a really good show. And people started to writing me. Richie Hawtin wrote me, and he said that he actually wrote me on YouTube like 1 or 2 years before, and he wanted me to sign for him on his I guess Minus label.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, obviously, if you're making something that sounds a bit Plastic Man, and you get an email from some dude saying, "Yeah, I'm Richie Hawtin. I really like your music," you don't really trust that email. You just, delete it.
Yeah.
And so I did. So
You got to
yeah.
speak to him in the end.
Oh yeah. We've been touring a lot. I guess I've been opening for him for like 40, 50 gigs or something like that. We're doing a lot of stuff in his Ibiza residence, and yeah. So yeah, I've been opening for him a lot. So.
What is it like to work with someone like Richie Hawtin?
He's just the most nice guy because he's same as me, super, super geeky. He has no rock star ambitions. Not what I've been noticing, at least. He's just a really general guy, and he really enjoys sitting on an airplane speaking about the 303 for like 3 hours. Very few people do that, so
Amazing. So I know that the early influences, you were saying you wanted to sound like, these sort of synth bands. Like what's your influences now? Like what do you listen to? If you're at home, what sort of music do you listen to? And is that actually inspiration, or is it just not so much? Where does the inspiration come from? I suppose that's
I mean, ever since I started releasing music, Basic Channel has always been my it's the blueprint of music. But so far, I've never tried to do an actual typical dub techno 12-inch or something like that because there's too much of it. But Basic Channel is really it's my comfort music. I When I don't know what to listen to, I always listen to Basic Channel or Rhythm and Sound because it's I know it's inside out. I can just put it on my headphones and walk around in the city and just feel great. I guess it's such a boring answer because I mean they also put out their first record in 1993. I didn't discover it until 1995, though, so so
but
they're
I
quite
think
new to me.
I think it's like one of those genres where if you just trace it back to the roots, there are a handful of Basic Channel, Rhythm and Sound. I don't know. Chain Reaction has released some nice, like there are a few things. But then if you just literally go to YouTube and put dub techno in, you get something that to me is not the same. It doesn't have
Yep.
It's like the sort of baby food version. It's like too clean and pristine. But would you ever be tempted to make something like Basic Channel?
Yeah.
Is that an ambition, or where do you want to go next? That's where I would like to know, really. Like what?
I'm gonna send you a few tracks.
Yeah.
They sound very much like Maurizio.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, again, the vocoder back
Mm,
there, what was it called? The SVC 350 from Roland. I've been using it a lot recently on delays and snare drums. It sounds Maurizio. I'm not sure if I'm going to release it. I played it live back in February, and I'm going to play it live next weekend as well. But it's maybe it's a bit too close to Maurizio, so so it's not. I mean, I really, really enjoy studying music, studying, music production, and try to do something super similar to, yeah, Plastic Man,
yeah.
obviously, and Basic Channel, Maurizio. But then I need to go a few steps back. Otherwise, it's just going to be okay. This sounds great, but it sounds like Maurizio, and Maurizio did it, you know, 25 years ago,
Yeah.
8 years ago.
What's your trick to make it your own, I suppose? Like to make it something that is not Maurizio or is not Basic Channel or
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, so far, I don't think I've put out any music that really sounds like those artists.
no, but what's your trick for like manage to sort of not necessarily those artists, but generally like, okay, now because I feel like the TM-404 is your sound, like
Yeah.
I don't really closely associate that with anyone else. It doesn't sound like you're trying to sound like someone.
Um, I do think it has to do with who you are, actually, because sometimes, I mean, I know that a lot of people obviously assume that I'm using only analog stuff or whatnot, but I've made so much music using just a laptop and pair of headphones, with a laptop on my stomach in a sofa somewhere. Um, and I'm not sure if it sounds too much different from the stuff that I do in the studio, uh, because I think that what really counts is who you are and your knowledge and your visions. So I'm not sure if it's, I can make sort of the same music, even without my vocoders and my tape echoes and my 303s. I'm not sure if it's an answer to your question, but I guess the actual human being behind the music is what really counts, and your ideas and your visions.
Do you
So
feel like your next step is that going to be in the sort of dub direction or dub techno direction, or are there other
um,
things that you're excited about?
I mean, my next release is with Units. I don't know if you know him.
So
He put out on Metalheads, and he's super, super, super busy these days. He's also
like drum
from,
and bass metalheads.
yeah, 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 yeah. And he,
Oh no,
I don't know,
I do know it. Yes, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I put out a record called Acid Dub as TM-404, like, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, something like that, probably longer. And he put out a record called Acid Dub Studies. Um, so a couple of my friends were like, "Hey, Andreas, you really should listen to this because it's reminds me of your music." So I heard it, and I really, really liked it. Not because it reminded me of my music, because I didn't think it did. I understand that he's been doing the same sort of thing that I've been doing, using the 303 with a lot of tape echoes and in a dub situation. But his album was more, traditional dub music with, melodic basses and stuff like that. whereas my music were not the same in any way. But he contacted me by Twitter, I think. He wrote me and said, "Hey, I really like your music. Maybe we should collaborate." And I was very, very happy to receive that, because by the time I've heard his acid double album quite often. So we started working on it. Is it maybe almost a year ago? Not really, but
You sort of send stems back and forth. Is that how you work, or something?
we send Ableton projects. So and it was always like, okay, do whatever you feel like with this. This is a sketch. Maybe you end up not using any of the sounds, and maybe I'm, gonna do the same with your track. So we sent projects back and forth, and we have an LP coming in the end of June on Acid Test, which is a really, really great label. I've been following them for 10 years, and I also appeared on their 10-year anniversary double LP last year. They have other great people like Donato Dossi and Tin Man and stuff like that I really, really love. So really happy to be on board on that label with Unit.
And what about, like, is there, because there's obviously been different stages where you've been into different types of equipment. So what about, do you get equipment cravings now? Is there any particular, even if you already own it, like what's inspiring you in terms of equipment? Is there anything there? Or is it literally like you say, like it doesn't really matter so much? You can just as well just use your laptop, or?
I guess the most recent one was the Native Instrument Machine Plus, like their standalone machine.
Okay. Never dared to try it. Tell me.
It was actually given to me by a friend here in Stockholm who runs a music store. It was one of those, I don't know how to say in English, but when you put it on display and people can demo it in your shop.
Yeah, sort of shop demo version. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he gave it to me, and because I was very interested in it, and I got super inspired. I bought like a battery pack, and I've been using it on buses because I really like the Native Instruments, like the Massive. I've been using it so much, and it's included in the box.
All right.
So I guess that's my. I haven't really bought that much stuff. I mean, the pandemic came and destroyed everything.
Yeah.
So I have bought so little equipment for the past 3 years or so. I bought a SSL Fusion compressor and distortion unit, which is over here, and that's about it in like 3 years.
When you do
So
mastering jobs now, like, is it hardware? Do you use hardware or do you use software?
my
Both?
most recent is only hardware. It's this Tube Tech compressor, multiband compressor that I've had for about 10 years, which is the main thing. And then it goes into the SSL Fusion and then back into the computer. So sometimes people actually ask me to do like, 100% hardware mastering. And sometimes I do anyway, but my last mastering, I guess my last two mastering jobs has been only with hardware.
Do you always master your own stuff?
The new Unit and TM-404 stuff. I even forgot the title now. In the Afterworld. It's not mastered by me, and I guess I would prefer not to master my own stuff because you've been working on it for a couple of months and your ears are tired. You know how it sounds. It's good to have a new, fresh pair of ears, I guess. But all the other TM-404 stuff I've mastered myself. So
Because it feels like the opinion of a lot of people say, like, like, don't master it yourself. And I don't think I've ever been able to pay for. Like I've released some stuff on an American label, and they have done it for me. But otherwise, I've just like I haven't been able to pay for it. So I suppose I just have to do it myself.
It should be included if you're putting out the record on a label.
Yes, exactly.
Label
Yes,
should
they
pay
would
for
do it. But if I'm just making music for myself, I'm just like,
yeah.
All right. I mean, this has been super interesting. Is
absolutely.
there any important thing that we have missed that we should have talked about? Is there something you would like to add or like to recommend?
Tomorrow morning, I'm going to Skåne, the very south of Sweden, where I grew up, to do a music video. I guess it's my first music video in like 15 years. And I'm doing it with Johan Familjen. We have a project called Innerst Inne. I guess you would translate it into deep within or something like that.
Yeah,
so we have an LP coming in just a couple of weeks, maybe in a month, on my own label, and it's electronic ambient jam sessions, I would say. And it's been delayed for a couple of years, so I'm so glad to actually have it coming now. The pressing plant will send it to me like in a couple of weeks, so I hope we put it out in July or something like that. And we have a a Swedish I don't want to say his name just yet because
that's okay.
you're gonna see him in the video. But yeah, one of my favorite Swedish skådespelare.
All right. It would be interesting to see who. Yes, famous Swedish actor. We'll see how who that might be. Is it something people from abroad would recognize, or is it very Swedish?
No, it's very Swedish.
Oh, okay. I'll see if I recognize him then.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible, and just get some insight into these things, and the bravery.
I'm so happy because my dog hasn't been interfering at all.
And the dog? Can everyone get to see the dog, or is it too far away?
There he is. And I mean, usually he's totally fine being with me in the studio when I'm just, making music and doing my mastering stuff or whatever. But as soon as I'm trying to speak, like, doing my radio show, he gets so annoyed because it's weird for him to hear me speak and I'm not speaking to him. But yeah, I guess he's tired or something because he hasn't interfered one bit.
It's Jussi, is that right?
That's Jussi.
Oh, beautiful.
Me and my partner is like, sometimes I'm here and I bring the dog, and sometimes the dog is back home, and we try to taking turns with him. So.
Okay, one last question. Who should I be speaking to next?
Of course, it's S. Mattisson, Force.
I would love to.
Yeah.
How can I make that happen?
I can make that happen. I'm going to force him. I'm going to force Force to speak to you.
Oh, yeah, I would love to speak to him. I mean, the few times I've sort of seen him and demo stuff, like I just want to hear what's behind the machines that he's making. Because
he's a really, really great friend of mine. And he's the only person that I put out on my label that isn't me. Like he's the only one who put out a record solo that is not, any.
What's the name? What's the artist name?
He's called Amble.
Amble.
Yeah, he only made one LP as Amble.
Okay.
If you give me your address, I'm going to send it to you because I have a lot of them in stock.
Oh yeah, I would love to hear it, and I would love to speak to him.
Yeah, I hope I'm going to see him tomorrow because I'm going to Malmö where he just moved.
Yeah,
he left Berlin like a month ago and moved to Malmö. So.
All right. Yes, definitely ask him. It would be amazing to speak to him.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to ask him. I'm going to force him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Force. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
See you.
I hope you enjoy that as much as I did. If you like this content, please consider liking and subscribing, and also check out the options for supporting this channel in the description below. I will also post a bunch of links to names and things that Andreas have been talking about in this video. Hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye.